What is the role of communication in an organization, in a team, in a group? Well, there are two different ways that we could conceptualize this. The first way that we could think about it is like an aquarium. That an organization or a group or a team functions like a fish tank. Everything in the fish tank relies on the tank. If the tank isn't there, then you just have a room full of water. You have fish flopping in and out, and you have little pebbles. The tank provides a container for everything inside of it. So in this way, we can think of an organization, a team or a group, like a tank. And the communication is contained within that organization, that group, that team. The only reason to communicate then is because you're a part of the team. All of the communication that happens is confined within the goals of the team or the organization. So things like individuality isn't really important in this model. Who you are before you entered the organization, before you entered the tank, isn't as important as who you are when you're in the tank. We also would see the different people within the team as replaceable, because what's important here is the tank containing everything inside. It also means that people at the top with power, they are the ones who control what happens in the tank. The ability to change the water, the ability to add new fish, are all functions of the people who have power. And the fish don't have much power. The water doesn't have control. When we think about organizations or teams in this way, a couple of things happen. We start to bifurcate our lives as in an organization or in a team and outside of the team. And we don't see much crossover. We have very separate work-life balance. We engage differently. We understand that we're replaceable. And so when we're in the tank, what's important is performing our best. But there isn't much of a reason to form relationships because we're going to leave the tank. And at that point, the conversation that happens, the communication that's there, shouldn't be about what's happening in the tank. So that's the first way that we can think about communication in organizations. But there's a second way. The second way would be understanding the constitutive power, the constitutive property of communication. For something to be constituted, it means that it is made up of or created by something else. You know, the United States, it's constituted by our Constitution. Our laws constitute our country. Our people constitute our country. Another way that we can think about this is your body is constituted by the different chemicals and molecules and atoms that make up who you are. That's the constitutive property. It means that when we put it in the communication discipline, it means that your communication makes up or creates different things: relationships, emotions, ideas, and organizations. In this way, we can think of an organization like a forest. If you cut down one tree in the forest, you still have a forest. That hasn't changed. If you plant a tree in a forest, you've changed something about the forest in much the same way that if you cut down a tree, you've changed something about it, but it's still a forest. A forest is made up of trees. And as the trees expand and grow, so does the forest. One bush in the forest is making up the forest. It's adding to it. There are no boundaries. around the forest. As trees expand and move in one direction, so does the forest. Whereas if this were the fish tank, if you got water outside of the fish tank, that water would not be a part of the fish tank. If a fish fell out, it's not a part of the aquarium. The room didn't become the aquarium. That fish is gonna die. Whereas if animals move the forest in a certain direction, the forest is moving in that direction. What this means is that the people who have power in an organization are the people who make up the organization. That each person is contributing something. Now, if this is a very small forest, 5 trees, not a very big forest, each tree in that forest is really, really, really important. If you take away one tree, all of a sudden you have reduced that forest by 20%. If this forest is hundreds of trees and you remove one tree, not as important. The forest hasn't shrunk that much. So in smaller organizations that function in this way, when we think about an organization in this way, each person in the organization has a lot of power, which is very different than how we think about an organization when we think about them as an aquarium. Now, be careful. This isn't to say that some organizations are aquariums and some organizations are forests, and they are aware of that. Most of the time they're not. What we tend to see are these follow in sort of industries. Some industries tend to function like an aquarium, where their people are replaceable. What's important is the container. There are some industries that function more like a forest. I would say that depending on where you go to school or where you worship, those organizations could also function either as an aquarium or as a forest. What happens to the relationships in that organization? Do they extend beyond the bounds of the organization, or are they confined to the organization? That might help you see how the organization functions. A person in an entry-level position, are they bottom rung or do they have a voice? That could tell you something about the organization. The ability to affect change, to heal, to provide, to help. All of these things could help us understand whether or not the organization is functioning more like an aquarium or more like a forest. But regardless of how the industry or organization tends to function, if we believe that our communication can constitute an organization, then the way you communicate matters. Your words have power.